As we close off one year and move into a new one, it's a time that feels, I guess, laden with possibilities. And it's also a time when we pause to ask questions we often overlook in the busyness of life. And those questions are, how am I feeling? Is it time for change? What goals will I set for the new year? But before you make any plans, I invite you to listen to today's episode because we have a very special guest joining us, Elizabeth Gilbert. She is one of the world's most loved authors, speakers, and spiritual teachers, and she is touring Australia in February. It's a big tour, and there are tickets available, so I will encourage you to get on board with this. Elizabeth, it is a real honour to have you here with us today. I can't thank you enough for your time.
I am so delighted to be here and to meet you, and thank you for honoring me with your time.
Well,
Very
you know, your book,
excited to talk.
Big Magic was the first selection for our book club.
I
And
know! That was amazing.
well, it's a great book, I can tell you. And it's inspired so much of what we've built here at the Aging Project, including this very podcast came about because of Big Magic. We took that leap, we put our fear aside, we put our perfectionism aside, and we just began. And here we are, you know, over 1 million downloads later.
Wow, look at that. Look at that. Wow, congratulations. And thank you. I'm so honored to have been your first book club selection. And that book, it's interesting. It's, I travel a lot. And lately I find in the last few years that people are sort of more tuned to Big Magic even than they are to Eat, Pray, Love.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's because that book gave people permission to create something of their own. Whereas with Eat, Pray, Love, I'm just spitballing this because I'm thinking about it right now. But I think with Eat, Pray, Love, there was a lot of, God, I wish I could do that.
Mm-hmm.
And with Big Magic, I think there was a lot of, now I'm gonna do that.
Which I'm imagining is so much about what your tour is too, because they're really, I know you're speaking, but it's also, there's workshop elements to it. So do you find, yes, your audience has sort of grown with you. And of course, we're all incredibly inspired by Eat, Pray, Love. And I know a lot of us did sit there and go, wow, is it time to blow up my life as well? But then what do we do? Then what do we do, Liz?
Well, yeah. I mean, as for the tour that I'm going to be doing in Oz in February and in New Zealand, there will be an element of a creativity workshop that I'll be teaching in Sydney, and then I'll be traveling around and talking about presence and talking about exchanging a life of purpose, which I think causes everybody to have extreme anxiety, with a life of presence that causes everybody to be invited into a more creative and fulfilling spiritual way to live. So that's what we're going to be talking about on the tour, and as well as, audience questions and hanging out with everybody. But somehow I have drifted in midlife into being somebody who just wants to be a cheerleader for everybody to make stuff. Like, drop whatever you're doing and make something. Seems to be the mandate right now.
But make it in the present. Don't make it for a purpose. Yeah. Don't make it about a purpose. And I guess this is something sort of foundational of aging well, I think, is spiritual health. You know, we often talk about gut health and physical fitness and mental wellness, but it feels like spiritual health and being present is sort of the basis of all of that.
I don't think we can be well if we're not spiritually well. And I want to make a very important distinction between the concept of spirituality and the concept of religion, because I'm always I'm respectful of religion, but I'm also careful and respectful about people who have been very harmed by religion, especially if people who are raised in what are called in sociological circles high demand religions. High demand religions, which can become abusive and oppressive, and so the whole concept of spirituality for somebody like that, or for somebody who identifies as an intellectual atheist, like that can be sort of off-putting. But my favorite definition of spirituality and the distinction between that and religion is this old standard. The difference between spirituality and religion is that religion is for people who are afraid of hell, and spirituality is for people who've already been there. and, and the way that we found our way out of hell was by tapping into and listening to a higher voice, a higher calling, a deep intuition, a moral compass of our own, finding some connection to mystery, to the infinite, something bigger than what we were. And I think without that, I mean, I can just speak for myself here. Without a spiritual life and without a healthy spiritual life, I'm just a meat puppet. Like I really am. I'm just a meat puppet with a long list of things to do every day. And I become in danger of becoming, and I say this with all love, too much like so many of the women who I saw when I was growing up, who were angry and exhausted. And angry and exhausted is not the life that I want to live. And without a deep and rich spiritual life, that's where I'm going to end up.
So, Liz, do you feel like you have to have had a crisis or a trauma to be able to really tap into that in its fullest? Or if we somehow find an understanding of needing that in our life without having to have gone through the pain, can we find out whether we're sort of spiritually thriving or whether we're starving? Like, how do you sort of identify within yourself without going, oh, well, I've kind of floated along. I've had a lot of, luck and love, but I still want more from me. And at this age, I'm 48. I have had a wonderful life. I've had, my ups and downs along the way, but I do want more. And how do you find that within yourself? How do you tap into that?
Okay. So here's the thing. From what I have witnessed, it does seem to be part of the contract of life that nobody escapes crisis or trauma, or at least massive unexpected upheaval. And I think that by the age of 45, certainly, definitely, probably by the age of 35, but by the age of 45, I think all of us could write a memoir with the same title, and that title would be Not Exactly What I Had Planned, right? Like, not exactly what I had planned. At the very least, even if it hasn't been some outrageous trauma or disaster, although that's probably going to be included in your life. That is going to be included in your life. It's part of the ingredients of life. At the very least, there was a direction that you thought your life was going to go in. And for whatever reason, it didn't. Somebody left. You weren't able to have that child. You had that child, and it turned out to be that there were enormous difficulties with being a parent. You yourself were unhappy in your marriage. The career that you thought would fulfill you didn't. There was a health crisis. There's losses. There's grief. There's the public grieving of everything that's happening in the world that's so difficult. So difficulty and struggle and crisis and trauma are part of the experience of being here. And one of the really beautiful things about the world's spiritual traditions is that they prepare us for that. And they take us through that, and they give us perspective on that. And they help us to find ourselves again after our hearts have fallen through a trapdoor and gotten lost in in a basement. Or even if you're just somebody who has spent her entire life saying there has got to be something more to all of this than what I'm seeing empirically. There's got to be something more, and what could that be? And these are universal human spiritual questions. This is your birthright as a human, that you get to explore these. And I traveled all over the entire world looking for answers to those questions. That's what took me to India. It's what's led me to sit at the feet of the greatest teachers and masters in the world. It's what led me to take 6,000 workshops. It's what led me to read 40 million self-help books. It led me into poetry and into art. It's like I've been that seeker. And I would say, where do you get started? Where are you bleeding the most? Where are you the hungriest? What are you yearning for the most? And let your hunger and your bleeding and your yearning be the the compass direction that you begin to turn your life toward, to find answers to that, and start asking around. Start asking people who've been through the same experiences as you have. How did you do it? How did you get through the addiction of a family member? How did you get through bankruptcy? How did you get through loss of a child? And if you can't find them in person, you can find them in books. And sometimes they lay a trail of breadcrumbs to help you get through the most difficult parts of your life as well.
Do you find that for most women, it would be the acknowledgement, full stop, that all of those things that they have been through and all of their trials and tribulations in life, as you say, are their life, but we don't often give ourselves space to acknowledge that that's a big deal, that those things are a really big deal, but because we're so busy getting on, and I think you sort of describe it as the hero's journey, that we're so busy being something for everyone else, which is obviously fundamentally a part of being female, being a woman, being a mother and a daughter and a partner. First of all, you've got to step back and go, hang on a second. Those things are huge, and I need to acknowledge them before I can go any deeper, or before I can even start to unpack what that might mean for me moving forward. I've also just got to give myself a moment to accept that I've been through all of this and now it's my time.
Well, I think there's a line that my friend Rob Bell said, and I put it in Big Magic because I loved it so much. He said, don't rush through the experiences of life that have the most capacity to transform you. And the experiences of life that have the most capacity to transform you tend to be the most difficult experiences of life. And our instinct, because of our deep historical and evolutionary desire to avoid pain and to avoid suffering, is to try to skate through those as fast as you can, like, get me out of this. I don't want to be in this chapter of my life. I can't wait for this chapter of my life to be over. And some of you who are listening to this are in a chapter of your life right now that you can't wait to be over. You're like, my life is waiting for me on the other side of this. And I've been in chapters of my life like that, where I like, make this thing end so I can get to the good part. But don't hurry too much, because there are treasures waiting for you through the living of that. You're in the crucible. And when you come out of that crucible, you're going to be a different person than you are, but you also have to contribute to that transformation by showing up for it. I speak often about this friend of mine, who I wrote about when I was a journalist for GQ 20 years ago. And his name was Jim McLaren. And he had these two horrific things happen to him, separated by 7 years. He was somebody who had it all. And then one day he was riding a motorcycle in New York City and he got hit by a bus and he lost his leg. And then he rose up in resilience and in recovery from that, and became the world's most storied and legendary amputee athlete, a multiple winner of many Ironman races, a motivational speaker. He really made the most of himself after that experience. And then 7 years later, he was racing in an Ironman and he got hit by a car and he became quadriplegic. And that's when he went down into the actual river of despair, because it was just too much. Like and life can feel like that sometimes, where that's an extreme example, but it's like, he said at one point, I thought I had paid my karmic debt. Like, I'd had my huge suffering. I thought I was done. And then this other huge suffering came, and he became this incredibly wise. He really had to go on a spiritual journey after that to find his own perspective on that degree of loss and suffering. And he was so wise and so kind and so thoughtful. And I asked him, do you think that you became this way because of these difficult things that happened to you? And he said, yes and no. He said, suffering itself is not enough to lead you into spiritual transformation. You have a part you have to play in that as well. Otherwise, you don't get the catharsis, this great Greek word about being coming out of the brokenness and being turned into something else. And you've got to participate in your own catharsis. And that means slowing down and being in it, and being willing to feel the pain, and being willing to have difficult conversations, being willing to do things that are incredibly courageous, that feel like they're beyond your reach. And he had this great line that I always loved. He said, pain without catharsis is just wasted suffering. And he said, there is no greater thing that can transform you in this universe than pain. Don't waste it. So what I would say is, if you're in a chapter of your life where you feel like, as the Zen masters say, first they pull the carpet out from under your feet, then they pull the floor out from under the carpet, then they pull the ground out from under the floor, and now you're ready to begin. And now you're ready to begin transformation. Don't be in a hurry to get out of it too fast. Don't move too fast through it. Show up for it spiritually, show up for it soberly. Show up for it with full presence and a sense of surrender and curiosity about what it's going to make you into.
I would think that anyone who's picked up any of your books is looking for that they're getting ready, I guess, is an expression. They've lived vicariously through you and your travels and with Eat, Pray, Love, and then they've got Bid Magic. They're like, okay, I'm working up to this. I'm getting ready. What comes next?
Well, you had asked, I want to make it clear, you can go on a spiritual journey without having had an enormous emergency or crisis in your life. But I just want to be clear that it's not really going to be possible to go through life without having an enormous emergency or crisis, no matter how much we try to avoid it. I think what's next is, what is calling to you? And what is calling to your curiosity? I think a place where people can get lost is that oftentimes they're looking for what we call in our culture their passion or their purpose. And they're looking, I always say they're looking up into the sky, looking for some lightning bolt, looking for some enormous message, some absolutely unmistakable direction from some divine force that's like, this way, this is the direction that your life is going in. But in my experience, spiritual and creative journeys are best, well, they're most authentically embarked upon when you're not looking up at the sky, you're looking at the ground for tiny little breadcrumbs and pebble trails, and that will begin to take you on a journey that you can't even imagine. And that begins with curiosity. So the question that I would have is, what are you a tiny bit curious about? It doesn't have to be the giant Moses on the mountaintop lightning bolt, thunderclap, transformative moment. Everything was different after that. It could be, but for many of us, we don't, our fortune doesn't communicate with us that way. I think it communicates with us through like a little nudge, a little tiny thing. I'm in Costa Rica right now because I want to learn to speak Spanish. And I couldn't tell you why. I don't have a really overarching, massively important emergency reason that I need to be speaking Spanish. I just want to learn to speak Spanish. And so that's why I'm here at the age of 55, learning to speak Spanish for no particular reason. I assume that I'll be shown why. And that's why I follow my curiosity. It's like, I don't need to know what the ending is the story about me learning to speak Spanish. I just know that if I do this thing that is piquing my curiosity, tapping on my shoulder and asking me to attend to it, and if I do it with honor and I do it with full focus, I'll be able to tell you 10 years from now why. I'll be like, remember that when I told you that I went to Costa Rica and I didn't know why I needed to learn to speak Spanish? Well, it turned out, there's going to be more of the story will be revealed. So don't need to know the ending.
Yes.
That's something that I would say. And I think people get trapped because they are so desperate to know the ending that they won't embark on something until they're sure that they know how it's going to end. But we can't know how it's going to end.
Or that there's a reason. I think when you're saying tap into that creativity and we go, okay, what's my creativity? I'll take a pottery class or I'll go and do some freeform drawing. It's like, well, that's a great activity and it's a great way to relax. But again, if you're looking for the purpose, or if you're looking how to turn your passion, and again, Western society, we're always wanting to transform that into a new business idea or a great concept that I can share with people, or how do I earn some money? How do I, leave my desk job and become this fabulous potter? That's not spiritual journey, is it? That's trying to find another purpose or trying to create another way of life, which again is awesome. But the way you speak about it, it's about let it happen from the heart and it will expose
Yeah.
itself. A quick pause for anyone interested in joining our DNA testing program in partnership with Fit Genes, a world-leading genetics company. So many of you have already joined our Fit Genes community. So now, for anyone who hasn't, it's your turn. Get to know your genes with us. When you know your genes and your unique genetic breaks, you can do something about it. For us here at The Aging Project, we've learned it's the best first step in our aging well journey. If you'd like to learn more, visit theagingproject.com and join the Fit Genes waitlist. We'll send you all the details so you can get started.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of not quitting your day job. I always say that I didn't quit my day job to become a full-time writer till my fourth book, and that book was Eat, Pray, Love. But until then, I always had so many side hustles because I think there's a capitalist urgency that we lay upon everything that says, I've got to monetize this and I've got to be successful at this or else it doesn't have any meaning or I'm failing at it. And that's not, I think, how people interacted with creativity for the first 100,000 years of human creativity. I think that people were following their curiosity and doing things that felt pleasant. I honestly think that's what it was. And so I would suggest that you follow your curiosity and do things that feel pleasant, and that you don't put yourself in financial jeopardy by saying my mortgage has to depend on how well I do at this pottery thing.
That's a big ask, isn't it? That's taking the spirituality, sucking the spirituality straight out of that.
It sure does, right? It sure does. Like, what if you end up that you don't like it? What if you end up that the people don't like what you've made? Like, so just try things in a lighter way. That's the encouragement that I'm always offering to people. Like they feel like if they can't write a Pulitzer Prize winning novel the first, like, straight out of the gate, then they shouldn't be writing. And that's simply not true. You're invited into all of these art forms. You're invited to dance. You're invited to sing. You're invited to write poetry. You're invited to make art. This is your human inheritance. You have the right to do this. And you have the right to do it without demanding that that you become the best at it, and without demanding that you become incredibly wealthy from it. The more of those demands you put on it, the more it will shrivel up and sort of retreat from your grasp. And what if there doesn't have to be a reason, like, other than that it's interesting to you? That what if curiosity is a reason enough? What if just being present with something that's mildly interesting to you is a good enough reason to wake up? I think it is.
I think it is. For you, as you say, Eat, Pray, Love was not your first novel, but the breakthrough. And I heard a wonderful interview that you did, and you were saying that, to cut it short, the people at customs, when you were returning back to your homeland, and they pointed out, where have you been and what have you been doing? You said, oh, I'm just a lady. I've been traveling. And it turns out, once they found out that you were the Eat, Pray, Love lady, they were screaming it to all their friends across customs that here she is, she's the one, because they had so many women coming back from their travels saying, oh, I've just been on my own Eat, Pray, Love. Oh, I'm returning from my Eat, Pray, Love. And I mean, that must have been a bizarre experience in its own, but to know that you have inspired and given courage to so many women, and I'm sure men across the globe, that had to have come from that spiritual place. That book wasn't just your next book, was it? You must have known when you were writing that this was something incredibly special.
I knew that it was incredibly special to me. And I assumed...
That's the difference, isn't it? That's the difference.
I wrote the book that I wanted to read. I wrote the book. I always have written the book. When it comes to nonfiction, I always write the book that I wish that somebody had given me 10 years ago. I'm essentially writing it for my younger self. Like, that's what Eat, Pray, Love was. God, I wish somebody had given me that. I wish somebody had given me the book Committed when I was getting married for the first time. I wish somebody had given me Big Magic when I was 20. I'm like, oh gosh, I'm always writing backwards in time to myself. But when I was writing Eat, Pray, Love, it's very difficult for me to even remember because I feel like I'm such an entirely different person now than I was. But the context of it was that I had spent the last almost 10 years working as a journalist who wrote nearly exclusively about men. And I had written for Esquire magazine, for GQ magazine, for Spin magazine. I only worked with men. I only wrote about men. I only wrote for men's magazines. It's where all the money was. It's where all the good writing was being published. This was back in the 90s. It's just the reality of how the world was then. And I got a lot of praise. I got a lot of praise, and I got a lot of award nominations for writing about men. Virginia Woolf had a great line. She said, men don't mind if you think, as long as you're thinking about men, right? So I spent a lot of time thinking about men, and I was very highly rewarded for it. And then I had essentially a nervous breakdown around the age of 31 in my first divorce, realizing that I didn't want to have children, blowing up the life that I thought I was going to be having, going through a horrific divorce, a horrific rebound relationship with somebody I became obsessed with, and that fell apart. I was a wreck. And all the tools I'd learned from hanging out with men didn't and couldn't get me through that. Being a badass, being sarcastic, being funny, being cool, could not get me through that emotional breakdown. What I needed to do was to learn how to tell the truth, learn how to feel my feelings, learn how to say that I was in pain, learn how to ask for help, learn how to say, I don't want this thing that I'm doing. I don't want this. Learn how to say no, often to men. So when I left my marriage and left my job and sold my house and went traveling for a year for Eat, Pray, Love, and I knew I was going to write a book about it, the only people who read my work up until that point were men. So I knew I was going to lose my audience and that they would hate this book. And I had to do it anyway. And I was like, no one's going to want this book. I was so focused on men that I was like, I forgot that there's like half an entire world of women, and I was right. The men that I had worked with and written for and about did not like that book, but about 23 million women did. And it was, and I never got, after that book, I've never gotten the awards again. I've never gotten the nominations for the National Book Award again. I've never gotten the nominations for the National Magazine Award or the National Book Critics Circle Award because I started writing only about women.
Screw them, Liz.
Yeah,
screw them.
But you know what I got? I got 23 million sisters. And we are on this journey together. And like, you can keep all that other stuff because now what I've got is this enormous global community of women who are daring each other to be free and daring each other to question whether everything that you were taught is in fact a load of horse shit, and whether you actually need to live the way that endless generations of women have been taught that they need to live. And that's what we're all questioning right now. And we're doing it together. And there's nowhere else I would rather be.
There is a movement, isn't it? And I don't know whether, again, this is just because we're of a similar age and this is what happens and you go through this incredible transformation. And I've got young daughters who seem so empowered by being feminine, which is wonderful. But our generation, it wasn't. You had to be, as you say, all of those things. But I feel at this age, and again, is this just a beautiful part of growing older, that you also gain this power or this ability to accept everyone for who they are and look at everybody's power and courage and be I guess, so supportive of that and so inspired by that. I feel we really regret not having such a connection to our elders anymore. And again, I speak a lot about Western culture because that's all I really have known. But the women's circles and things, maybe we would have been a lot more in touch and aware had we still had those beautiful cultural traditions of respecting our elders, and we would have learned all this stuff without having to go through all the drama and the pain if we tuned in earlier.
Once again, there's no going through life without going through the drama and the pain. No, so be careful not to go into cultural nostalgia. Those people had to go through drama and pain too, right? But like, as for the question of the women's circles, listen, I can tell you this: at the age of 55, here's the thing I know for sure: everything in my life that I ever thought that I needed to get and had to get from one man, and that I had been taught by every single cultural story in the world, that if you want these things, these emotional nourishment, this value, this support, this encouragement, you've got to find the man who will give it to you. Everything that I ever thought I had to get from one man, I can only get from a community of women. Mm-hmm. And that, it's like I've traded this idea that there's one man who's going to give me all of this, with there's a community of women and we're going to give it to each other. And that's how we're going to be well, and that's how we're going to be strong, that's how we're going to be emotionally autonomous, that's how we're going to be spiritual. So that's all I know for sure, is that is that female community is where I am finding all the healing and all the love that I sought for all those years from one dude at a time.
You hang out with some pretty cool women now, don't you, Elizabeth? I mean, you've been on stage with spiritual teachers like Martha Beck and Oprah. We can add Deepak Chopra in there as well. But these incredible women who don't seem to feel the pressure of what they've been able to achieve with their success and their power and their spirituality. I mean, you guys are creating this massive movement and this massive amount of freedom and questioning. That's a lot of responsibility, but I see it makes you all light up. It's like, yes, everybody come with us, rather than, oh my goodness, what have we created here?
It's a lot of fun, is actually what it is. And we're here also to remind each other of what we forget sometimes. I don't want to go into any of the details, but there was a professional situation recently where I was talking to a really beloved and powerful woman who I admire a great deal, who's a great spiritual sister of mine. And I was being asked by some men to do a thing professionally. I don't want to identify it in any way. And I was on the phone with her and I said, I'm not going to do the big thing that they want me to do, but I'll like give them this, like I'll do this thing, this small. And she said, can I just reflect back to you what your voice sounded like right then? That you sounded defeated and depressed by the idea of conceding. You're going to concede something I used to do when I was dating. It's like, I'm not going to do this with you, but I'll do this.
I'll do that.
It's like, all right, like, and I felt like that, but like in a professional setting where I was like, well, I have to compensate for my no by handing over this allegedly smaller concession. And she said, from what I hear you saying, you hate this project and it makes you feel like your soul is being sucked out of you. Why in the world would you do anything with it? And this is what we're here. I mean, this is shit to remind me of that, like, and I'm out there all day publicly reminding other people of that. But this is why you need the women's circle, is because you need your supportive and loving sister who wants the same freedom for you that you want for you, to say, wait a minute. I see that you are about to step back into a prison. Why are you doing that? Who are you people pleasing right now? And why do you feel that you need to do that? And so, empowered by that conversation, the next day I sent an email saying, no, I'm not going to do any of this. Yeah.
Oh,
And
Elizabeth.
everyone's going to have to learn how to survive their disappointment.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to have to learn how to survive that. There's somebody out there who might think that I'm a terrible person for saying no. Byron Katie has this great line that she said, if I could only, this is a spiritual teacher who's probably influenced my thinking more than anybody in my whole life. She said, if there's one prayer that I could pray for the rest of my life, it would be, dear God, please save me from needing the love, approval, and understanding of others. I mean, without that need, I'm free,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And without that need, I'm free to look not into their eyes and faces for what they need me to answer so that I don't lose their love, approval, and understanding, but I'm able to look into myself and say, what is the true answer here? Do I want to do this thing? Or does it make me recoil and want to throw up? Oh, it makes me recoil and want to throw up. So no, I'm not doing it. And I can survive what I can do at 50 that I couldn't do at 30 is I can survive somebody not approving of me.
Oh, Elizabeth, I love you.
Oh, I love you too, sweetheart.
Yes, we
I
all
love you
need this. We
too.
all need this, and we're all searching for it, and we're all coming together for it. And if you don't have those people to call on, and if you haven't created that wonderful circle around you that can give you those honest comments when you can't give them to yourself, I think everyone needs to go and find that. And we hope here at the Aging Project that we're creating an environment and a community for exactly that. But it really, again, comes down to listening to your inner voice, doesn't it? And that's, for me, that's my own spirituality. I have to trust myself and my decisions. And as you say, that is going to disappoint some people along the way. Do you think having guides, like we've often spoken a lot about manifesting, vision boards, that sort of thing, if you have those reminders physically in front of you, whether it is a vision board or a journal, is that something that you've ever used to help you stay on track and stay on path? You can come up with these great ideas, but if I'm not literally having them stare back at me every day, whether they're not stuck on the fridge or right there beside me when I wake up, that I do sometimes fall back into my old patterns? Or are you just see them before your very eyes and you move forward? A quick pause to invite you to become part of our growing community. To gain access to all our podcast episodes, a weekly newsletter, and our new free 5-day morning challenge that will kickstart your aging well journey alongside us, go to theagingproject.com.au. It's that easy. We'd love you to join us. Let's come together, connect, share stories, and reimagine what aging well looks like. Now, back to today's show.
I have done vision boards, and I'm thinking, you're reminding me, I don't know if you're familiar with Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way. But in that's a book that's it's like a 12-week long, is it 12 week? I think it's 12-week long guided sort of mystical journey into creativity. And I always say there would be no Eat, Pray, Love without The Artist's Way. It was in the pages, the daily structured exercises of The Artist's Way that I began to see this journey that my spirit really wanted to take. One of the questions, she's got this great practice called the morning pages, where you wake up and you write 3 pages just on whatever. You just start spewing unedited words onto the page for 3 pages every day. And at some point in the journey, she has you go back and look at your morning pages and look at what keeps coming up. Like what keeps coming up as desire. And I was shocked to discover that Italy just was on almost every page. I mean, I think we can be so disconnected from ourselves, and we can live in such a sense of lack of deserving that we don't even know what we desire. Other than to, in my case, for most of my life, to be pleasing and loved. But on almost every page, was like, I wish I could go to Italy. I wish I could live in Italy. I wish I could learn to speak Italian. And I was like, wow, apparently I really want to learn to speak Italian. And I didn't even know this about
Mhm.
myself. Right. And so I started taking Italian classes at night, 2 days a week at this place that I called Night School for Divorced Ladies, in New York. That was just like adult school night classes. And I had no destination. I just wanted to start learning Italian. And 6 months into it, I was like, no, I need to go to Italy. And that began the Eat, Pray, Love journey. Um, so again, this is breadcrumbs,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Um, but for me, the main guiding voice for me at this point is a practice that I do every day, where I write myself a letter from unconditional love. And I ask the spirit of unconditional love, dear love, what would you have me know today? And then I imagine the most loving, abundant, generous, compassionate, unshakable spirit of love answering. And I write the answer. And in those answers, my life is charted, and so I can take a wrong turn. I can get into the wrong relationship with somebody, and I'll reach out to unconditional love, and unconditional love will be like, you're allowed to leave. Yeah, you tried it out. You took a risk with this person, and now it doesn't feel right, and it's not working. I always say that the most powerful sentence a woman can learn is, this isn't working for me. And unconditional love reminds me again and again and again that I am allowed to say that. I'm allowed to say that to my family. I'm allowed to say that in my friends. I'm allowed to say that in my romantic relationships. I'm allowed to say that in my professional relationships. And the thing that I found that is so extraordinary about the phrase, this isn't working for me, is that no one can fight against it. Because the only argument they could have is, yes, it is. It's working for you. I remember a friend of mine's, as she was divorcing her husband, he kept saying to her, it's time for you to acknowledge that you are in a perfect marriage and you just don't realize it. And she's like, no, this isn't working for me. You're not hearing me say, this isn't working for me.
Mhm.
This isn't working for me. And it's almost like you don't need to say more than that. I don't know why it's not working for me. It's not working for me. I need to go. I need to go. And that you're allowed to go.
I think we all used that as teenagers, didn't we, to get out of that relationship that we weren't, and we didn't even know why, but you're like, it's not you, it's me. It's not you, it's me, which is kind of
Right.
evolving into this. This isn't working for me, which has more power and more meaning. But back then it might have been an easy way to blow someone off. But ultimately, it's the truth. It's not you. You can find someone else
Or
who's
you
absolutely
can
perfect
bring it to,
for you.
or you can bring it to your partner and say, what's the for instance, the balance of chores and labor in this house is not working for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like the balance of childcare is not working for me. The amount of time that I'm spending cleaning up after this family is not working for me. So let's sit down and talk about how we're going to make this work. Yeah, the amount of money that I'm getting paid at this job is not working for me. The disproportionate amount of time in this friendship that we spend talking about your problems is not
It's not
working for
working for
me.
me.
It's not working for me. This is not like you. This is applicable wherever life is not working for you.
Mm-hmm.
You can go to your spiritual leader at your church or at your synagogue and say that the teachings that I'm hearing here are not working for me. Like it's not these teachings and these exclusionary ideas are not working for me. The homophobia in this office is not working for me. Like there are all sorts of places where you're allowed to say that. I basically feel like the United States government is not working for me. It's another reason I'm here in Costa
Costa
Rica. I'm
Rica.
like, yeah, this is not working for me.
I'm
gonna
off
get
to
out of
Costa
here.
Rica.
I'm going. And the extraordinary thing is that women are constantly looking. My experience is very, very, very rare, very rarely not this, that women are looking for somebody to give them permission
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to go, rather than generating that from themselves and saying, no, I'm not waiting for somebody to, because people don't give you permission to go because you're usually the one doing everything. Like why in the world would they want you to go? If
Exactly
you're,
right.
relationship is not working for you because there's such an imbalance of how much you're pouring into the emotional and physical and financial labor of that relationship. Why in the world would that person give you permission to go? But you get to say, this isn't working for me. There's an old adage, there's an old blues song, and it didn't used to be the case that women could leave. For most of history, women literally, physically, financially, and legally could not leave. But if you are privileged enough to live in a culture where you've got those freedoms, it might be time to flex them. There's this old blues song that says, when a man gets the blues, he grabs a train and rides. When a woman gets the blues, she hangs her head and cries. And that's how most of it has worked out. But you can grab a train and ride. Like you can go.
But it's also away from your old habits, isn't it? You can say the way that I eat is not working for me. The way that I don't exercise or don't take time for myself, that's not working for me either. So that question or that statement to yourself is also going to bring, I think, to the surface the things that are working for you, because you will feel this little, but that works for me. And then you follow that little train, don't you? So it doesn't,
That's it.
Hey, it's not just negative. It's not working for me, but this really is. This is
just
making
a fact. It's
Yes.
not working for me.
Yes.
The way that I'm only getting 5 hours of sleep a night is not working for me. Constantly being on antidepressants and antibiotics, which are wonderful, miraculous tools of science. I'm not against any of that. I just want to make it really clear. But if I'm living a life where I'm so depleted, one thing that I've noticed, where I usually have to start changing my life when I notice that I'm at the doctor's office a lot. It's like if I'm at the doctor's office a lot or looking for a new therapist.
Yes. This is not working for me.
Isn't working for me. I'm sick again. I'm exhausted again. I have had relationships. I've had family and relative relationships where my nervous system is so jacked by this person or by this setting that the only way in the past I was able to go into their house was if I had a sedative. Like if I had a CBD gummy or a Xanax or some kind of a prescription or non-prescription drug to calm my nervous system down, only then could I actually be at that dinner table, right? Now, at the age of 55, I have a voice that says, being in relationships with people around whom I feel I must be sedated in order to survive the conversation isn't working for me. I'm just not going to go over there. And I'll skip the thing where I have to pop a pill in order to go over there. If I have to pop a pill in order to go over there, then I probably shouldn't be going.
But and again, right back to, I'm allowed to say no. I don't have to explain that to anybody. I often have to explain it to myself a lot harder than I have to explain it to anybody else. You start giving yourself a list of reasons why this isn't working for you. You don't need a reason. You just need to know it's not right for you. And that's enough.
And it's non-negotiable. One thing that I will say sometimes is, this doesn't feel right in my body. That's also non-negotiable. I mean, somebody can't say to you, yes, it does. It's like, no, I'm actually living in my body and I'm having a physical sensation right now that feels like PTSD. And that's usually a sign for me that this is not a good thing for me to be doing. My body's trying to let me know that. So I don't know what the answer is, but I know it's not this. So I'm going to need to take some time. It's also, I found it really effective in conflict with people. There's my friend introduced me to this idea of there's a line of consciousness. And this has helped a lot. Like for me, staying sober and doing a lot of meditation has helped me figure out where that line of consciousness is. There's a line of consciousness. And if I'm above the line of consciousness, I have full access to all my resources. And I can call in all the tools that I know about how to communicate. And I can practice self-care. And I can regulate my own nervous system. And I can find answers and solutions. And I can negotiate and I can navigate. If I'm below the line of consciousness, I start to shut down. My hands and feet start to tingle. I start to feel like I'm going to throw up. My body feels like I'm in this panic state. And when I go below the line of consciousness, because something has been triggered that's got me there, I know from experience, I've never once made a good decision from that place. Never once. And so when I'm in an interaction with somebody and I'm below the line of consciousness, I've learned to stop and say, listen, I'm below the line of consciousness right now. I can see that I'm super activated. I can see that I'm super triggered. I look at my hands. I'll show them. I'm like, see how my hands are shaking. I'm having a physiological reaction to this conversation. My lived experience is that I've never once made a good decision from this place. And I've never once had a conversation in this place where I did not later regret something that I said. So I'm going to ask for a timeout so I can go stabilize myself. And then we can reconvene and maybe talk about this differently, but I can't have this conversation in this physiological and mental state. And it's not about them. It's like, I'm disordered and dysregulated right now. I'm going to call a pause. Mm-hmm. I'll see you on the other side, maybe.
And no one has the right to argue with that, do they?
Can't.
This is you.
And they don't. In fact, they typically take it unless they're unless they're just really a wreck. Like, they generally will be relieved that they also get a timeout. Mm-hmm. And it's a really good thing to model for people. Like, hey, we're in a circular no-win conversation right now. Let's go to our corners and see if we can find our breath. And then maybe we can talk about it later.
And this is why you are the Elizabeth Gilbert. And not to put any pressure on you at all, but I know that this conversation is going to have helped so many just take a little bit more ownership over their own lives and positions and spirituality and well-being. And you've thrown out the first breadcrumb for us, Elizabeth, to work more on ourselves and be able to take back that ownership of ourselves. This is our one chance at a fabulous life here on earth, but we have to make those decisions for ourselves and be unapologetic about what works for us. And to have people like you stand before us and show that it's going to be okay, and that we can move forward, and that this too shall pass, whatever phrase it is that you may need. And I know they will find many of them in your writings, and even on your Instagram, there's always these wonderful little things that pop up at just the right time. And to know that you are coming to Australia, and so many Australian women will have the opportunity to hear more of you and your guiding light, I think is the best gift that 2025 could bring for us here in Australia. And I do encourage everyone to find out when and where, Elizabeth. It's in February, so you'll have to get in quick. And I know there is a difference between seeing Elizabeth on stage and being involved in one of her workshops. So whatever's going to work for you, I believe this is that little lightning bolt moment that you've all been waiting for, and I'm thrilled that we were able to bring Elizabeth to you here at the Aging Project. I feel invigorated. I have some work to do. I know that you are a very, very busy woman, but to have been able to share this time with you has been extraordinary, and I thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Shelley. Oh my God, you're so lovely, and thank you for coming with such intelligent and thoughtful questions. And I absolutely enjoyed every moment of it. And maybe we will meet when I am in Australia. And thank you to everybody listening. I really appreciate you all. I feel you all.
Our hope is today's conversation empowers you in some small way, perhaps to start looking for your own breadcrumbs and curiosities, to remember you can say, it's not working for me. To remind you that it's normal to ask the deeper and biggest questions in life, to know suffering is a part of life and it offers lessons and learnings you'd otherwise never get, to inspire you to create your own vision board and manifestations for life, the ones that light you up and make you feel alive, to bring us together as women and to lift each other up, to remember our spiritual health is foundational to our aging well journey. If you'd like to see more of Elizabeth, which I know you will, please visit her at elizabethgilbert.com or check her out on Instagram. The links are in our show notes. Here is to a wonderful new year just around the corner, my friends. Thank you for continuing your aging journey with us here again this year. Hitting the 1 million download mark tells us how much we all need guidance on our aging well journey, and we are delighted to be on this journey with you. Sending you love and light, and we'll talk again soon.